So you ready to go off into the weeds on another video? We're gonna nerd out again. I like to start my videos with a little bit of a weather update. It's 25 degrees outside and I'm in my garage in a t-shirt because I got that feller back there. Well, you can't even see it. Up there. Cranking away. It's 65 in the garage and loving it. But this video, we are going to go off the deep end on the Fuel Tech traction control strategy that I use on what's mostly a no prep style bike. I only refer to it like that because we don't run a lot of great tracks, and everything I do with this bike has been mostly about getting it down questionable marginal surfaces. So I'm just, just for clarification, that's just how I refer to it, so you kind of understand that this isn't a XDA prep pro street caliber kind of deal. I race on crappy surfaces. I like doing no prep style races. So with that said, I get a lot of questions about the Fuel Tech stuff and the traction control, wheelie control, all the stuff it's capable of doing without having extra sensors and crap on the bike. The Fuel Tech will do it, and it does it very well. I was very hesitant to do this video because it can open up a box of worms and you can get in over your head, but I think it's time to kind of break down how I have approached it. And I didn't pull this out of my ass. I had guidance to get me started to explain what was what, and after that you gotta be willing to put in the time to monkey with the settings. It's the only way you're gonna learn how to do this stuff. And I'm gonna do this video kind of the same way as I was shown. Here's your options. Here's what you can work with. Now it's up to you to get creative and find what settings are gonna work for you. I can't give you numbers to just plug in. I can let you know what that area of numbers is gonna control, but I can't tell you what numbers are gonna work best for you. Traction control and wheelie control for that matter, but we can do that some other time. It's not just an input and make it work kind of scenario. You have to have data. You gotta be willing to go out and make passes that are gonna suck. You also gotta find time to get to a track that's maybe got some really good prep, because you're gonna need some good data. You gotta find a way to get data to base what your settings are gonna work off of. That make any sense? I hope it makes sense. A lot of people just want the easy answer, put these numbers in and you're gonna have traction control and it's gonna go down the track every time and just make perfect passes. That's not the case. And that's also how I'm gonna show you how I've approached it, because I'm not using just traction control. So instead of me just babbling on about what you can and can't do, we're just gonna go over to the laptop and I'm gonna show you, and I'm gonna try to make this as easy of an explanation as I can for you guys to understand. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to try this stuff yourself either. The only way you're gonna make this work and get better and we're all gonna get faster is we kind of share info, and that's why I decided that like now is the time that I should probably show you what I've been doing, because I feel like what I'm doing and how I'm utilizing the features of the Fuel Tech might seem kind of unorthodox. It might not make sense to some. It might click and set a light bulb off for others, for something to try. I think I stumbled into something pretty good. And again, this is for tracks that aren't great. This is what I've been working with. What I'm going to show you how I'm doing would help you if you get to a really good track. You'll know what to kind of tame down or what to turn up. But for now, we're going to stick to this, no prep style of track. I don't want to, just cliche no prep. I don't know how else to say it without sounding, TV-ish kind of guy. Not great track racing, less than marginal track racing. I don't know, but yeah, that's what we do. That's what we work with. So I'm just going to show you what I've been working with. I'll show you what has not worked and what I've stumbled into after hundreds of passes at this point of figuring out what the bike likes and what our local track likes, and also how you can determine what will work good for your track. If there's a quirk to your track, this might help you figure out where it is and how to attack it. So now we're going to dig into the laptop, and I'm going to show you some real shitty video quality of what we're doing. So bear with me, let's dig into it. So to start out, I should probably explain that how the Fuel Tech, traction control works without having any extra sensors on the bike. It uses the built-in accelerometer. Basically, it's a G meter. That can create an accel speed graph, so it'll show you what the G meter is reading for basically what would be a mile per hour, and it compares that to your actual wheel speed, and that is referenced off of your stock speedometer sensor, your front sprocket sensor. So that gives you your rear wheel speed. The Fuel Tech takes care of all the math to figure out, your engine RPM, crank to clutch basket, gear ratio, all your transmission ratios, your final drive ratio, and then your tire size to give a pretty accurate mile per hour reading. So when the Fuel Tech sees that your wheel speed is suddenly increased over your accel speed, which would be like a dip, just like in a G meter would read, if it's spinning the tire, the G's are going to fall off. If it's hooked up and booking, the G's are going to rise. But what happens is when it sees that difference, the wheel speed is exceeding the accel speed, what the G meter is reading, or the accelerometer is reading, it can pull timing or reduce spark energy. This is where I was saying you have to figure out how much is too much and how much isn't enough to correct those issues. Now, you could have several different tables set up through here. So go into the traction control settings here. You could do down here, you could have a table for each gear if you wanted. You can toggle between tables that you want to have set up. I only have basically one table set up. I just have one setting because of how I'm utilizing the traction control. And right now I have it set to pull maximum of 12 degrees and a maximum of 30% ignition cut. Minimum slip to activate traction control, 20%. So it's not just a dead on as soon as it sees the wheel speed exceed the accelerometer, it's going to start doing something. You can give it a preferred amount of slip. Again, these are numbers that I've found work best on my bike for some of the surfaces we go down and conditions we run in. And then if you notice here, it says enabled after validated launch, which means once it comes off the two-step, it will be active after 2.2 seconds in the run. Now, you can change that to be active, the moment you release the clutch lever. So it also has a setting here, speed to activate, reference speed. So I have to be 2.2 seconds into the run and over 100 miles an hour for the traction control to do anything. The reason I have it set this way is because I only use the traction control on my bike, and this is where we're getting into sort of like my specific sort of circumstances. I'm only using traction control down track. After 2.2 seconds into the run, that's when, if I got a button on the dash to turn it on and off. If I decide I want to try to, the track is getting kind of dicey down, towards the big end, I can opt in or out of basically having traction control active for that pass. Say it's getting to be a cooler night, the track's getting greasy up top, I'm going to turn the traction control on, and now these settings are active, and then we get into the tables. The tables, I don't know if I really want to get into. That might be going too far off into the deep end on this particular video, as I'm just trying to kind of show you what you can do. I'll show you what it is anyways. It's this. Here's the table. So here's how I have my table set up. We got your throttle, your TPS on the left here, and your speed across the top, your mile per hour. This is basically how much it's, right here, it's vehicle speed based slip target table 1. So just as an example, at 100% throttle at 100 miles an hour, it will allow 27% wheel slip. Now, on the other table I had, you saw I had a target, a minimum target, 20%. Yeah, without flipping back, I think I had that set at 20%. Like I said, I've changed these numbers so many times to find out what works. That 20% is, from what I've seen on the data, is where it will start making adjustments. Once it hits that 20%, it will start making adjustments to try to control it to whatever percentage I have in here. So there's an operating window. Things don't just happen instantaneously. It's not going to wait until it sees 27% and then try to do something. I want it to start at 20% slip and start making its controlling adjustments with timing or spark to maintain 27% so that it doesn't get out of control and end up at 50% tire slip or whatever. So just that's kind of the rough idea of what's going on with this table. I have some numbers in here, some arbitrary numbers that I thought were just kind of safety numbers because it's I don't spend a lot of time at 50 to 80% throttle, but there's occasions where it'll knock the tire, and these settings didn't control it. It was just too violent of a spin, and it just got outside of the parameters faster than it could catch it. So there is some little safety margins I have in here to make it, if I got to back out of the throttle a little bit, it'll still target something for traction control. Now, that's enough of that. Now, if you want to go ahead and screenshot my settings, I don't really care. Go ahead. I'm a rookie at this, and I'm probably lying to you for 90% of what I'm saying here anyways. So anyway, that's the basic concept of the traction control. It's all internal. There's no extra sensors on the bike. It's just making a comparison between two data log traces basically on the bike. And I'm going to try to, on the fly here, because I didn't research any or pre-record or set myself up for anything here. I'm going to try to go back and find a data log of a couple of my older passes, and I can show you where it's not doing anything until 2.2 or whatever the number was that I had at that time, however many seconds into the run, and then you'll be able to see a bunch of marks where it's taken timing in and out, and I know the traction control was working down track. And we'll get into some settings there. But you're probably still questioning why I'm not using the traction control at the launch. And I'm going to explain that. But I did not get this method of traction control to work very good at the hit. I feel like I spent a lot of time trying to get the bike to spin and have this system catch it like instantaneously at the hit. And I didn't have real good success. And I feel, I could be wrong, I haven't really run this by anybody. I feel like that's because the accelerometer isn't really, at instantaneous, the bike's not moving yet. You throw the lever and the bike's trying to plant and go. If it can knock the tire before the bike moves 2 inches. The accelerometer hasn't really created any kind of a graph or anything to compare to the wheel speed. So the wheel speed just takes off and the accelerometer is still way back here going, yeah, buddy, I ain't got no data to share with you here. So I think that's why I struggled at the hit to get it to catch anything if the track was bad. But there's another way around that I feel is better and more responsive because it's instant data. And I'll show you what that is now. Now we're really going to get off into the weeds. So over here, you have your time-based compensations. That's where I'm controlling the launch. What I'm doing, I'll try to get this a little bigger here. Okay, you see a bunch of stuff just popped up here, and we got an empty window over on this side. This is where I was saying you need to have good and bad data to be able to create this stuff. What I'll do is bring in a good file, and I'll show you how I created something here. But what I'm going to basically show you is I'm using time-based timing following a drive shaft curve to control the first roughly 3 seconds. I've moved that number around a little bit. The first 3 to 3.2 seconds of the run is controlled by following basically, you hear, some people just say they're riding the dots. This is basically what that system is going to be, because you can see how everything kind of, that's my boost curve. We don't need to look at that right now. It's just something else in the way. We'll turn that off. There, now we don't got to look at that. So, what these are, this down here, this is a window of operation here. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm going to bring in a drive shaft curve and it's going to put it right in there. But these other settings are a high limit and a low limit for, I should probably just bring in the drive shaft curve so I can show you what I'm talking about. So bear with me as I click around here. So we're going to go look for a data log here. Let's see. There's a 750 pass. We'll do that one. New clutch. Okay, so what I just did is I brought in a whole bunch of squiggly lines. We don't need all of them right now. In fact, we don't need any of them besides the drive shaft curve right now. So what you can do is turn everything off. Everything went away. Now all I'm going to do over here is select drive shaft RPM. And bang, there is a curve. Now if you look real close, that's a drive shaft curve for that pass. Notice how down here the curve is real under control, and then up here where the timing or the time-based timing stops, and then we get into where the traction control would have been active for the rest of the pass. It's trying to spin the tire. That's timing, that's controlling that. I'll show you that on an actual data log, but for now all we're concerned about is the fact that this was a full pass and we were controlling wheel speed down here with a time-based timing. So all this is a low limit down here, which is, for me, honestly, is almost kind of irrelevant. You have to look at this drive shaft curve as it's your rear wheel speed is all it is, because it's based off of the front sprocket sensor, so your speedo sensor. So that low limit that's down here, all that is if for whatever reason that drive shaft curve during the pass ever dropped below that line, I could make it add timing to try to, spunk the motor up a little bit, get a little more guts back into it, and try to get it to come back to where that curve is at. It wants to be at that curve. I'm not a fan of adding timing at any point, especially if that RPM graph, drive shaft curve, dropped below that limit. It probably lugged the motor or something went wrong. I don't need to throw timing at it. So that curve is just zeroed out. Now you have your high limit. You notice how close that is to my actual curve. This curve is based off of a 480 eighth mile. You need to have some kind of a somewhat full, clean, good pass to base a curve off. Otherwise, you don't know where your high limit's going to be. And now, because I set that limit right above, I set these limits off of previous curves, but this was a separate pass that I didn't base this off, but that's how close it follows it. But if you go in here, all these settings over here, this time-based, this one up here, time-based ignition advanced retard, that's one that I play with so that I don't have to monkey with the curve every time. I can go in here and straight tell it I want to take out a certain amount of timing for a certain amount of time. It's a real quick, easy adjustment to make. If track's real bad, bam, let's rip some timing out of it. And that's all this is showing here, is you can set all these points over here. And that's actually what these points right here, that's what these are. So you can see at zero timing, I must have been monkeying around with a track that was somewhat marginal. I think this might have been from 41. At the hit, it's pulling 3.5 degrees of timing for a quarter of a second, 3 degrees at half a second, and it slowly ramps the timing back in by 2 seconds. All this is an initial, the track's kind of crappy, kind of control. Normally I don't have this in here. We will just work off the drive shaft curve, but this was helping control that instantaneous wheel spin. But for now, we'll pretend that we didn't need that, because normally I don't. So we'll just turn the view off for now. So boom, that went away. But what I was just getting at is you can add these points at any interval you want for any amount of timing that you want. And the thing to remember with timing is, especially when you're trying to control wheel speed, is you don't have to be gentle with it. You don't worry about making nice flowing timing, retards and advancements back in. This one is kind of smooth because it's just what the bike liked. That was working. If you're on a real shit track and you got to rip a bunch of timing out, that's what you need to do. Rip it out instantly. Get the thing to catch the tire, slow it down, and then put the timing back into it. You make these long, smooth, swooping timing controls, they're too smooth to actually control anything. They're not reacting fast enough. You're not going to gain any ground by just, softly pull in a little bit of timing here and then slowly put it back in there. To stop wheel spin, you got to be kind of aggressive sometimes. But that's all this. I was just explaining. This was a band-aid I was trying to use on a later rounds race. But in these settings up here, this window of 4 settings we have time-based, drive shaft RPM, speed A, we got speed B, and then timing high and timing low. Right here. Speed A, speed B, so that's going to be your upper and lower curves. Then you got timing high and timing low. We will view this one here. So there you can see is my upper limit drive shaft curve. See how I'm riding the dots, right? So there's the dots. I didn't spend a lot of time creating a bunch of extra plot points on here because the curve was pretty easy to generate. So this is what it's shooting for mile per hour, for time by mile per hour. So that's what that drive shaft curve is reading here, is mile per hour by this many seconds into the run. These are, I can't say it enough times, these are numbers that I've had to work with and manipulate and try to figure out what it likes. And all these are is things for it to not exceed. The next setting you have is your time-based drive shaft speed B. This is your low limit. This is where I have nothing in here for compensations. So these are just the plot points. Now if it drops below this curve here, this one, this is what it's going to do. This is the action it's going to take. If it drops below, the drive shaft curve drops below this plotted line, it's going to do nothing. 3.14 seconds out, nothing. This is here just in case I need to, add anything, but it automatically, when you start selecting this window of stuff, it automatically provides this. Just zero it. You don't need that. I don't need it anyways. Now this is the other. See, it looks like a lot going on because this graph is multi-use. There's different things scaled in different ways in different spots on this graph. Don't get confused by it. Just stick to the numbers that you need. So here is my timing based on time, or my time, the timing that it's going to pull. This is just the graph showing how much it's pulling. You can see from 0, bam, it rips out to the first point, and then it slowly starts adding timing back in until we get back to 0 timing pulled. That's what happens when it exceeds this line. So your time-based drive shaft timing low, these are the amounts that it's pulling at the hit and for how long. This is what it will do when it exceeds that graph at any point in that graph. So, like I said, you got to be kind of aggressive with the timing. With this curve, if it exceeds that at the hit, it's going to catch the wheel by pulling 12 degrees of timing out of it. Then it's going to slowly start adding timing back in now. Like, stop the spin, now put the timing back. Minus 10 degrees, minus 8, 6, 4, all the way back to, at 2 seconds out, we're back to 0 timing. Get the timing back in as fast as you can once it stops the tire. But that's a pretty aggressive whack to go from pulling 12 degrees out to having only 4 degrees pulled out over 1.5 seconds. So that's how fast this stuff happens, and that's how fast you got to hit this to stop a tire when it initially, instantaneously spins. I hope what I'm saying is making sense about why I'm doing this as opposed to traction control for the launch of the bike. Like I said, this reads, or this this reads wheel speed instantaneously. As soon as that wheel spins and shows a mile per hour, which it records it instantaneously, it will jump past that line, and the ECU will catch it immediately. Like it's amazing how fast this ECU will respond if you tell it what you want it to do. All this is just manipulation of things. But this is why on like my no prep style racing, I need to make sure it catches instantaneous wheel spin. I don't think it'll do that very good with the traction control only. The traction control strategy works really well for me down track when the bike has it has established an Excel speed to compare to the wheel speed. And I'll open another data log and show you where the traction control is actually working. But the cool thing about this method, and well, backing up for a second, the traction control strategy probably would work good by itself without having to manipulate this type of stuff on a very good prep track where you're almost guaranteed to not spin the tire at the hit. But we're not guaranteed that. So this is how I found my Band-Aid to get around instantaneous tire spin and control it for the first, we'll say 2.5 seconds, 2.5 to 3 seconds into the run. And the reason I picked out that far is because there's a transition at our local track that is about 2 seconds out. So by having the wheel speed controlled for past that transition, gets me over the transition, it doesn't hit it and then knock the tire off. So it's just a good way to, I control it down low, get over the transition, and then that's when I stop my time-based timing control, which technically isn't traction control, but that's when I stop it, because now, after, I'm just going to say, just because it's close, that's 3 seconds. After 3 seconds into the run, the bike is free to basically lay down a number, anything that it wants. You could do this type of time-based timing control. You could lay a plot over the entire pass and make the bike follow that plot for the entire pass. But if it's hooked up and trucking, it'll never let the wheel speed progress past your high limit. So it'll slow the bike down in theory. So by stopping it this early in the run, the bike is free to basically run out and go as fast as it wants to go on that pass, because the traction control will not do anything if the tire is hooked up and the bike is accelerating. So it's sort of a best of all worlds kind of thing here. So that way, if the track is getting real good in the evening, or not, I shouldn't say in the evening, into the event, more cars are running, more bikes are running, the track's getting better, you don't have to worry about your plot that you got set up, and if you ran it all the way out for a full pass, you don't have to worry about that basically handicapping the bike to run the same slower ET when you could put some real power down in the big end and let the drive shaft curve run out, and that mile per hour on the drive shaft would exceed that, or the wheel speed would really run out, and let the bike be free. So there's multiple benefits to what I'm doing here. And like I said, I can't stress this enough. Like, my numbers or what I'm doing might not make sense to anybody else, but you can get in the neighborhood by understanding why I'm using numbers for certain things. Like, what numbers go here, what numbers go here. They'll be your own numbers, but you'll understand what they're actually controlling or what they're doing. So this is kind of, like I said, getting into the weeds a little bit, but I've got a lot of time in trying to make this work. And like I said, even that track was getting so bad that even this plot of ripping 12 degrees out at the hit when it spins the tire, even that wasn't enough. I had to go back and add another. Oh, I turned the view on. There. I had to go back and add another additional little boost of timing ripped out of it to get it to catch the tire down here. But now I think what I'm going to do is go into another data log, not in this screen. I'll just open up a data log, and I'll show you what actual traction control looks like and what it's trying to do down track. It won't control the bike to a limit of a curve. but it will control a targeted sort of wheel speed and RPM. So it will catch the tire from really ripping away, and so it in theory it's going to slow the bike down, but it will also salvage a pass. That's the whole point of traction control, is you won't run your best pass with the traction control doing shit. Your best pass is going to be when the traction control didn't do anything. But you're getting into final rounds, and you know you need to make sure you get down the track. The traction control can save a bad pass. You'll at least get down. So now we're going to get out of this mess of lines, and I'm going to show you a little more of the what the traction control looks like on a data log. All right, guys, I got the I had to do some searching to find a good data log to show you what I'm trying to explain. I think this is probably the best one to show it. All the things that kind of go on with what I'm doing with a bike like this. So you can see here, there's a big, all I have displayed right now is RPM is green. So we got our green trace is RPM. TPS is this tannish color. You can see there's a big dip and then it's flat across the top. And ignition timing is red. And then all of this down here is traction control. Now if you look, you know, a keen eye will catch that the RPM here maxes out, goes right to the limiter, and the TPS dumps. It spun the tire, but clearly the traction control didn't do anything. This is where my time-based timing should have been doing something, and it wasn't enough to catch it. You know, bottom line, that was a fuck up on my part. I didn't have the settings right to catch that, because you can see up here where it's got full time. This was different settings from what I just showed you guys. This is just a different data log. This is me playing around with stuff. So you can see it goes from full timing, it rips the timing out, and the bike's starting to move, but it knocked the tire off right here. So I didn't have enough timing pulled through this area here to catch that wheel spin. Or that's the TPS dump, to catch that wheel spin. Actually, I should put up the drive shaft curve. There's the drive shaft curve. So you can see it looks pretty good throughout the rest of the pass, but here's where it freaking started to knock the tire off. It was trying to catch it and it couldn't control it. Spun the tire, lifted the throttle, RPMs are maxed. So that's what happened in that area here, but clearly the traction control wasn't active. So if you look down here, we're between 2.5 and 3 seconds. All of a sudden the traction control is trying to do something. All those black lines mean is it was trying to either, you know, pull timing, or, you know, the black means it's pulling timing. The gaps between the black is where it's putting the timing back in. But you can see how much it's actually doing. The track on this pass must have been absolute garbage down, you know, towards the big end. But if you'll notice, I was at full throttle, and look at the RPMs. You know, I short shifted a little bit, but for the most part, shift, shift, shift. That's a pretty good looking RPM trace for something that was basically knocking the tire off. It was being controlled. And this red trace here, all of these, you can see the timing was pretty smooth through here. It pulled timing right here. That's a shift. That's a shift. That's a shift. You know, and so on. But you can see where it started to get into some wheel speed, and it was pulling timing to correct it. Wheel speed, timing, shift, wheel speed, timing, all the way down. You can see where it was spinning the tire, but it kept the RPMs kind of under control. And there is basically a secondary rev limiter that you can set when it gets into the traction control. It will not let the motor rev above a certain RPM. Now, if that's too low, the bike is going to straight up fall on its face. It'll lose all boost. It gets kind of violent, as I've learned. I have that rev limiter. Well, I'm calling it a rev limiter. I have that set basically just, well, we'll go look in a minute, but I'm just trying to show you here how the drive shaft curve, it's shaky because it is trying to spin the tire. It doesn't just instantly smooth the tire spin out. But you can see how well that curve smoothed out while it's spinning the tire. And then you can see how the RPM was kind of all under control. So this is just kind of different things to look at in a data log. You can kind of see what's going on. And when you get into the traction control, if you ever start monkeying with this stuff and you make a pass and it gets into it, it's going to feel like you're riding a bike that's on a rev limiter. I've had people on the starting line come, back into the pits after I've made a pass and asked if the bike was running right or if I was missing a shift or something, because it can be kind of violent sounding. But if you keep that rev limiter set closer to like your, not right at your shift RPM, but at the RPM where the bike is still up in RPMs, making some power, it's where it's happy. You don't want to pull all your RPM out of it, but keep it up in the upper window of happiness, and it'll calm it down a little bit as far as the violent aspect of it. And again, I'm not pulling a ton of timing and a ton of spark, because that can be kind of violent on the motor too. I've seen motors actually knock bearings out of them because they spend so much time on traction control because they're trying to use it every pass to save every pass. This is just a security blanket. And if you keep your settings nice and soft, it'll work real good for you. Settings get too violent, it's hard on parts, and it can actually just slow you down more than your wheel spin would have. But I'm going to go back now and show you what I was talking about with the that rev limiter deal. So let's go back into, sorry, it's been a while. There we go. So let's go back into traction control right here. So if you go up into this window right here, minimum RPM, I'm going to read this to you now. This is the minimum engine RPM that the traction control will keep as RPM limiter until the wheel slip gets to the target numbers. Usually this is the minimum RPM that the engine can sustain power during a launch. So basically they're telling you, pick an RPM that's the maximum that will still control that wheel spin, if that makes sense. But I have it set at 11.5, so when it gets into traction control, it won't rev past 11.5. That's still enough RPM to keep the bike accelerating down track, but it's not so little of RPM that it just kills the motor and almost, shuts the bike off. So that's just, easy little reference number. And then over here, you got a reaction level. I got mine set at 3. You can control how aggressive the timing or the traction control is. 3 has just been my happy spot. That's something you'll kind of have to play with, and it'll make more sense the more passes you make when it's in traction control, where it's actually doing something. So 3 was just my happy area. It says, right here, I'll read this to you. Can't read it. Sets how aggressive the control uses the ignition cut in order to reach the target wheel speed slip. Lower levels may cause the control to be slow and ineffective. Higher levels may cause it to be too hard and unstable. So they're telling you right there that, getting into the traction control real hot and heavy can be a little bit hard on things. So again, my settings are free to share if anybody wants them. But and I'm not even an expert on this. This is me telling you guys and showing you how much I have struggled through trying to figure out how this stuff works and how it acts, making a change, making a pass, absolutely going out there and laying eggs in front of people, not being afraid to look like an idiot and make slow passes. You got to get good data and you got to have bad data. And I'm sure somebody will come on here and probably tell me how I'm doing something wrong or I got a certain setting wrong. And that is absolutely 100% fine with me, because that's the only way I'm going to learn to advance farther than I've gotten is by accepting some input on some of what I'm doing here. And I know throughout this video I get a little talky, and sometimes I've probably said a few things incorrect because I'm winging this. I don't rehearse. I don't rehearse any of what I'm telling you guys. I'm trying to pretend as if you were actually in the garage with me hanging out, and I'm sitting over here pointing stuff out and explaining things like if we were in the trailer between rounds. But this is the gist of how I'm utilizing the traction control and time-based timing to get the bike down. Not great surfaces. And I hope this makes sense. Wheelie control, we could do a whole nother video on wheelie control if you guys really wanted to see that. We're down here now, wheelie control. Settings for that. You got pitch angle compensation, ignition cut. Fancy settings. We could do another one on that of what I've found has worked pretty good for me. But the best thing you can do for now, if you've never monkeyed with this stuff, is get used to going into your time-based features, practice bringing in your data log, just any data logs you got saved. Just go up here, load data log file, click your log, bring it in, start playing with stuff. You know, bring in your drive shaft curve and start turning on some curves, set some plots, some dot plots and things like that. And the more you play with this, and the more you start seeing what changes and where you can input a number and what it affects, the better off you'll be, because that will start to make sense before you ever even make a pass to try the stuff. You're going to see what it's going to try to do before you even, let go of the lever. So that's it, you fart smellers, or smart fellers, however you want to take that. That's the bare bones breakdown on the traction control strategy theory I'm utilizing on the turbo bike for not great tracks. I'll say this 100 times until I'm blue in the face. I am not the best. I'm not the most proficient. I don't talk good. I don't look good. I don't dress the best, and I wear dirty hats. But I just struggle through this stuff, and I try to learn. David Ligori Drag Racing, he's the one that got me started on this stuff. He's gave me the initial guidance, and after that, it's exploration. I've bounced ideas off him for things I might be thinking about, like, hey, if I do this, can I do that too? And he's right on it. But for the most part, you just got to get out and make passes and get data. Start, making changes. Don't be tied to a tuner. You guys can do this. I'm an idiot. I'm a big idiot, and I've figured out majority of this on my own by just making passes. Make a change, figure out what doesn't work. Data logs are life. They will tell you everything. So, yeah, I'm not saying you need 1,000 sensors on the bike, but you need 1,000 sensors on the bike, and you're one of them. But you need data. Data will tell you everything. And every time you make a pass and you get a data log and you can make changes and refine something, you're going to go faster. The bike is going to get better and more consistent. And maybe something I'm showing you or showed you in this video will help you get your bike down not great tracks. Because, like it or not, this summer was a big reality check too with the traction compound shortage that was kind of going on. A lot of tracks cut back on their test and tune days or hosting big events because they couldn't get, track prep. Not a big deal for most because the no prep thing's kind of taken off. So you might be forced more often than not, or in the future more regularly, to be a no prep kind of guy. I mean, it's just kind of how things are going. I'd love to have a super glued track to go down every time and have career best passes all the time. And oh man, wouldn't that be fun? But I'm not traveling to them races, and my wallet's tight. So we're gonna do what we can with what we got. And that girl's a lot of fun to try to get down sketchy surfaces, because you can still be fast. And I'm trying to prove that with the right ECU, the right simplistic kind of setup, and the right data, you can get down some pretty crappy tracks. So I hope this made sense. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The only way all of us get faster is by asking questions and sharing info. And I'll tell you if I don't have the answer for something, but I can also only share with you what I am doing. The last thing I want to hear is somebody arguing with me about what I have that's working. I'm always down for input and better ideas, but what I just showed you on that laptop is legit what is working to get this bike down shitty tracks. So there might be little tweaks I can make to refine that, but I don't know what else to tell you. That I've stumbled into something I think works pretty good. So if you want to go that route and that technique that I'm doing with, using the drive shaft curve for the first part of the pass, maybe to get you past a troubled spot on your track, and then go into the traction control down track farther, where it seems to be a little more, a little more responsive. It works better, I feel, once that accelerometer has an established movement, moment of inertia or something. I don't know, fucking big words. I'll get a dictionary out one of these days and learn something. But for now, I hope you had fun. someday we'll get back to mechanical type stuff. I got some stuff coming already. I just don't want to tear into the bike right now until I know I can accomplish what I want to accomplish. Otherwise, it's just a pile of parts sitting, taking up space. I love when I can come out, work on my thing, and put it back together, and the benches stay all cleared off, and it's just how I am. But for now, thanks for watching. Yell at me, flame me, mock me, whatever makes you happy. Like the video, subscribe. We'll try to do some more stuff. Leave some of my video ideas if you want. You know, I'm always down for that. That's what 90% of what I've been doing is you know, ideas of people that want to see stuff. So take it easy. I don't know. Should I do the palm transition? We're gonna go away now. Did it work? I'm still here. All right. See you in the next video.